I was sitting alone in a crowded cafe, exhausted after a long day, scrolling through a photo of my daughter on my phone. A young woman walked over and asked to share my table. We exchanged a few polite words until she glanced at my screen, her eyes lit up, and she said something that made my heart stop. "That's Ava, isn't it?" She knew my daughter's name. A complete stranger. So what was happening? Who was this woman? And why did she know about my little girl? Stay with this story until the end. Hit like and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon, the kind of place where people came to disappear for a while. Ryan Carter sat wedged into a corner booth, shoulders tight, thumbs working slowly across the screen of his phone. His daughter smiled back at him from the photo, gap-toothed, eyes crinkled, holding a half-melted ice cream cone like it was a trophy. Ava, 7 years old, the only thing in his life that made sense anymore. He set the phone down and rubbed his face with both hands, pressing his palms against his eyes until he saw spots. The day had been brutal. 2 back-to-back shifts at the warehouse, the kind where your feet throbbed and your back felt like it might snap if you bent the wrong way. Then he'd come home to find a note from the landlord about the water heater, busted again, 3rd time this year, and another envelope from Ava's school about some fundraiser he definitely couldn't afford. The envelope was still in his jacket pocket, unopened. He'd deal with it tomorrow. Or the day after, whenever he had the energy to feel guilty about saying no. He'd come to this cafe not because he wanted coffee, but because he needed 40 minutes where nobody needed anything from him. 40 minutes where he could just sit and breathe and not feel like he was drowning. The cafe was packed, every table occupied, voices layering over each other in a hum that blurred into something almost soothing. Ryan didn't mind the crowd. Alone in a crowd was better than alone at home, where the silence had sharp edges and the walls felt too close. He picked up his phone again, scrolled past the ice cream photo to another one. Ava on the swings at the park near their apartment, her hair flying wild, mouth open mid-laugh. Another of her asleep on the couch, clutching the stuffed rabbit with one ear missing that she'd had since she was 2. He couldn't help it. Looking at her face steadied him somehow, reminded him why he dragged himself out of bed every morning at 5, why he worked jobs that made his body ache, why he kept going when everything felt impossible. She was worth it, every single piece of it. "Excuse me," Ryan glanced up. A woman stood beside his table, mid-20s maybe, holding a ceramic mug in both hands like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She had dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, tired eyes with faint shadows underneath, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked like someone who'd also had a long day and was just trying to get through it. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice soft. "Every table's full. Would you mind if I sat here? I promise I won't talk your ear off or anything." Ryan hesitated. He'd come here to be alone, or as alone as you could be in a public place. But she looked harmless enough, and he wasn't using the other half of the booth. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Go ahead." "Thank you so much." She slid into the booth carefully, setting her mug down without spilling. "I really appreciate it." Ryan nodded and went back to his phone, hoping the conversation would end there. He wasn't trying to be rude, he just didn't have the energy for small talk with a stranger. For a few minutes, it worked. She pulled out a paperback book with a worn cover, the spine cracked in multiple places like she'd read it a dozen times, and settled into reading. Ryan scrolled aimlessly through his phone, not really looking at anything anymore, just moving his thumb to have something to do. The cafe hummed around them. Someone laughed too loud at the counter. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. A couple near the window argued in low voices about whose turn it was to pick up groceries. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Then the woman's voice cut through again, softer this time, almost tentative. "Is that your daughter?" Ryan looked up sharply. She wasn't looking at her book anymore. Her eyes were on his phone screen, which he'd tilted just enough that the photo of Ava on the swings was visible from across the table. He locked the screen immediately, instinct kicking in hard and fast. "Yeah, why?" The woman blinked, seeming to realize how her question might have sounded. She sat back slightly, both hands around her mug again. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. I just—" She stopped, her expression shifting into something he couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or recognition. "I thought I recognized her." "You thought you recognized my daughter." Ryan's voice came out harder than he intended, edged with something protective and suspicious all at once. Maybe? I'm not sure. She held up one hand in a small gesture of surrender. I don't want to be weird about this. I just thought her face looked familiar. That's all. Ryan didn't move. His hand stayed wrapped around his phone. You see a lot of 7-year-old kids, do you? I used to, actually. Her voice was careful now, like she understood she was on thin ice. I worked at a community center a few years back. I helped out with after-school programs. If she went there, I might remember her. Ryan studied her face, looking for anything that seemed off. She didn't look dangerous. She looked nervous, uncomfortable even, like she regretted opening her mouth. But that didn't mean anything. This city was full of people who seemed fine until they weren't. Can I see the photo again? She asked quietly. Just for a second. I promise I'm not trying to be creepy. Every alarm in Ryan's head went off at once. A stranger asking to see photos of his kid. That was textbook predator behavior, wasn't it? The kind of thing they warned you about in those online safety seminars he'd sat through at Ava's school. But something in the woman's face stopped him from shutting her down completely. She looked genuinely uncertain, like she was trying to solve a puzzle and couldn't quite make the pieces fit. What center? Ryan asked instead. Harbor Point Community Center, over on Lexington, near the old fire station. Ryan's grip on his phone loosened just slightly. That was the place. He remembered it clearly now, the building with peeling paint on the doors, the smell of old carpet and microwaved popcorn, the bulletin board covered in construction paper art projects. Ava had gone there when she was younger, back when he was working 2 jobs and couldn't always pick her up from school on time. It was cheap, run mostly by volunteers, and Ava had seemed to like it well enough. She used to come home talking about the games they played, the stories someone read to them, the snacks they got in the afternoons. He'd stopped taking her there when she turned 5 and started kindergarten with a longer school day. He'd almost forgotten the place existed. You worked there, Ryan said slowly, still not entirely convinced. Volunteered, yeah, for about 2 years. The woman's posture relaxed just a fraction, like she was relieved he hadn't told her to leave yet. I helped with the kids who came in after school, crafts, snacks, homework help, keeping them entertained until their parents showed up. That kind of thing. Ryan tried to pull up any memory of seeing this woman before. Nothing came. But then again, he'd barely paid attention to the staff back then. He'd been too focused on getting Ava signed in and racing off to his second shift at the restaurant downtown. I don't remember you, he said bluntly. You probably wouldn't. Most parents just dropped off and left. That was sort of the whole point, right? You had somewhere else you needed to be. The words stung a little, but they were true. He had needed to be somewhere else. Always somewhere else. Working, hustling, trying to keep the lights on, and food in the fridge. Okay, Ryan said, his tone still guarded. So you volunteered there. That doesn't explain how you'd recognize my daughter from a photo years later. Some kids stick with you, the woman said simply. Not because they were problems or anything like that, just because they were memorable. And you think Ava was memorable? I know she was. The woman paused, then added carefully, Can I see the photo again? I just want to be sure before I say anything else. Ryan hesitated. Every protective instinct he had screamed at him not to show his phone to a stranger. But he was also curious now, hooked by the idea that someone else remembered his daughter from a time in her life he'd barely witnessed. Slowly, he unlocked his phone and turned it around, holding it so she could see the screen, but he could still keep control of it. The photo showed Ava mid-swing, her hair streaming behind her, mouth open in pure joy. The woman leaned forward slightly, her eyes focusing on the image. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then her face softened, and something that looked like genuine warmth spread across her features. That's her, she said quietly. That's definitely her. Ryan pulled the phone back. How can you tell? She was tiny back then. She's got the same smile and the same eyes. The woman looked at him now, meeting his gaze directly. Her name's Ava, isn't it? The bottom dropped out of Ryan's stomach. How do you know that? Because I remember her. The woman's voice was gentle, like she understood this was freaking him out. I'm not guessing. I actually remember your daughter. Ryan set his phone down on the table between them, face up, like he was laying down evidence. Okay, so you remember her. Tell me something about her that proves it." The woman didn't hesitate. She had a stuffed rabbit, light brown, floppy ears. One of the ears was torn and hanging by a thread. She brought it with her every single day and kept it in her cubby, but she'd take it out whenever another kid was upset. She'd let them hold it until they felt better. Ryan's chest tightened. The rabbit. The same one Ava still slept with now, 7 years old and holding onto a toy she'd loved since before she could remember. She used to hum when she colored, the woman continued, her eyes distant, like she was seeing something from years ago. She didn't even realize she was doing it. Just this soft little tune, the same few notes over and over, and she always shared her snacks. Always. Even if it was something she really liked, she'd break it in half and give some to whoever was sitting next to her. Ryan couldn't speak. His throat had gone tight. The woman smiled, a real smile this time, tinged with something bittersweet. She was one of my favorites. I probably wasn't supposed to have favorites, but I did, and she was one of them. Ryan forced himself to swallow, to find his voice again. "What's your name?" "Sophie. Sophie Lane." "I'm Ryan. Ryan Carter." "It's good to meet you, Ryan." Sophie's smile widened just a little. "Officially, I mean." They sat there in silence for a moment, the cafe noise swirling around them like a protective barrier. Ryan's mind was racing, trying to fit together pieces of information he'd never had before. This woman, Sophie, had known his daughter during a time when he'd been mostly absent. She'd seen Ava in ways he hadn't. She remembered things about her that he'd never witnessed. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said finally. "Of course. Why'd you remember her specifically? You must have had dozens of kids coming through that place." Sophie considered the question, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I did. Probably close to 50 or 60 kids total over the 2 years I was there. But Ava stood out." "Why?" "Because she was kind in a way that most kids that age aren't." Sophie's voice was thoughtful, careful. "Most 4-year-olds are still pretty self-centered. That's normal. They're just starting to understand that other people have feelings too. But Ava was different. She noticed when other kids were hurting, and she did something about it." Ryan leaned forward. "Like what?" "There was this boy named Marcus. He came every day, and every day he'd scream when his mom left. Just absolutely lose it. Crying, hyperventilating, the whole thing. It was hard for him and hard for everyone else because the noise was scary and overwhelming. Most of the other kids avoided him. They'd move to the other side of the room, put their hands over their ears, that kind of thing." Sophie paused, her eyes softening with the memory. But not Ava. The first time she saw Marcus crying, she walked right up to him, took her rabbit out of her cubby, and handed it to him. She said, and I remember this exactly, she said, "You can hold him until your mom comes back. He makes me feel better when I'm sad." Ryan felt something crack open in his chest. "And it worked," Sophie continued. "Marcus stopped crying. He just sat there holding that rabbit, and Ava sat down next to him like it was no big deal, like she'd just done the most natural thing in the world. After that, it became their routine. Marcus would come in, start to panic, and Ava would bring him the rabbit, every single time." "I didn't know that," Ryan said quietly. "I had no idea she was doing that." "How could you? She was 4 years old. Kids that age don't come home and give you a report on their emotional intelligence." "I guess not." Sophie tilted her head, studying him. "Can I ask you something now?" "Sure." "Did Ava ever tell you about the center? About what she did there?" Ryan thought back, sifting through memories that felt faded and incomplete. "She talked about it sometimes. Said she liked the snacks. Said there was a lady who read them stories, but she never mentioned helping other kids or anything like that." "That sounds about right. She probably didn't think it was worth mentioning. To her, it was just what you did when someone was sad." Ryan looked down at his phone, at the photo of his daughter frozen mid-laugh on a swing. He thought he knew everything about Ava. What she was afraid of. What made her happy. How she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles instead of rectangles. But this whole other version of her that existed when he wasn't around, he'd never seen that. Never even suspected it. "She's still like that," he said after a moment. "Still shares everything, still notices when people are upset." "That doesn't surprise me. Last week she used her allowance to buy a candy bar for a kid at school whose lunch got stolen. Didn't even tell me about it. I only found out because the kid's mom called to thank me." Sophie's smile was warm. "See? Same kid, just bigger now. Ryan felt a swell of something he couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or gratitude. Or just the strange comfort of having someone else see his daughter the way he did, as someone worth paying attention to. You said you volunteered there for 2 years, Ryan said. You're not there anymore? Sophie's expression shifted immediately, closing off in a way that was almost physical. No, I left. When? About 3 years ago. Ryan did the math in his head. That would have been right around when he'd stopped taking Ava there. Maybe a few months before. Why'd you leave? He asked. Sophie looked away, her jaw tightening slightly. It's a long story. I've got time. She glanced at him, something guarded in her eyes. You sure you want to hear it? It's not exactly a feel-good tale. I'm sure. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still wrapped around her mug, even though the coffee inside had probably gone cold. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, like she was trying to keep emotion out of it. Things changed at the center, she said. It started slow. New management came in, brought new funding sources, big donors who wanted to be involved, wanted to see where their money was going. At first, it seemed like a good thing. We got better supplies, newer toys, more books. The place got a fresh coat of paint. It felt like we were moving up in the world. But, Ryan prompted, but then the rules started changing. Sophie's mouth twisted into something bitter. Certain kids started getting treated differently. Better snacks, more one-on-one attention, first pick of activities. And if you asked why, you were told it was because their parents were major donors, that we needed to keep those families happy if we wanted to keep the lights on. Ryan felt his jaw tighten. So rich kids got special treatment? Exactly. And it wasn't subtle. The other kids noticed. They weren't stupid. They could see that some kids got the good markers while they got the dried out ones, that some kids got help with their homework right away while others had to wait. Some of them started acting out because they felt invisible. Others just shut down completely. That's messed up. It is. Sophie's voice was flat now, anger simmering just beneath the surface. I tried to push back. I talked to the director, told her we were supposed to be there for all the kids, not just the ones whose parents could write checks. She said I didn't understand how nonprofits worked, that without those big donors, we wouldn't have a center at all, that I needed to be realistic. So you quit? Not right away. Sophie shook her head. I stayed because of kids like Ava and Marcus and Jamie and the others who needed that place. I thought maybe I could still make a difference, even if the system was broken. I thought I could at least be fair to all of them when I was in the room. What changed? Sophie's face darkened, and for a moment Ryan thought she might not answer. Then she took a slow breath and met his eyes. There was an incident, she said carefully. One of the donor kids, his name was Brendan, he was about 6. He had a mean streak. Nothing awful, just the kind of casual cruelty some kids have before they learn better. Pushing, name-calling, taking toys. The staff were told to go easy on him because his parents donated a lot of money. Like, a lot. Enough to cover half the center's operating budget. Ryan felt his hands curl into fists on the table. One day, there was this other kid named Jamie. Sweet boy, always drawing pictures of dinosaurs and spaceships. His mom worked nights, so he was there late almost every day. Jamie had spent like an hour working on this drawing of a T-Rex. He was so proud of it, showing everyone, talking about how he was going to hang it on his fridge. Sophie's voice went quiet, tight with controlled anger. Brendan decided the drawing was stupid. He walked over, grabbed it right out of Jamie's hands, ripped it into pieces, and threw it in his face. Then he shoved Jamie, hard. Jamie lost his balance and hit his head on the corner of a table, split his forehead open, started bleeding everywhere. Ryan's stomach turned. Christ. I saw the whole thing, Sophie continued, her voice shaking slightly now. I was on the other side of the room, but I saw it. I got Jamie cleaned up, made sure he was okay, called his mom. Then I went straight to the director and told her what happened. I said Brendan needed consequences, a suspension, at minimum, something to show him that behavior wasn't acceptable. What did she say? Sophie laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said Brendan was going through a difficult time at home, that boys will be boys, that we needed to have compassion for what he was dealing with. And then she told me, explicitly told me, not to contact his parents because they were our biggest donors and we couldn't afford to upset them. Ryan stared at her. She told you to cover it up. Basically, yeah. She wanted me to file a vague incident report that didn't name Brendan specifically and let the whole thing blow over. Did you? Sophie's eyes flashed. Hell no. I called Brendan's mother myself that night, told her exactly what her son did and exactly what injury he caused. Then I wrote a detailed incident report with witness statements and sent it directly to the board of directors. What happened? They fired me. Sophie's voice was flat again, drained of emotion. 3 days later, said I violated protocol by contacting a parent without administrative approval, that I'd created unnecessary drama and jeopardized the center's funding. They thanked me for my service and told me to clean out my desk by end of day. Ryan felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. That's illegal. You were reporting child safety issues. Maybe, probably, but I didn't have money for a lawyer, and they knew it. I was a volunteer, not even a paid employee. I didn't have any real protections. Sophie shrugged, but he could see the hurt underneath the gesture. I found out later they told the rest of the staff I'd quit because I was moving out of state. Made it sound like it was my choice. The cafe suddenly felt too loud, too bright. Ryan's mind was spinning, trying to process what he'd just heard. This place where he'd trusted his daughter to be safe, where he'd assumed she was being cared for, it had been broken in ways he'd never imagined. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. You deserved better than that. It is what it is, Sophie's voice was resigned. I learned a hard lesson about how the world works. Money talks. Everything else is just noise. That's a pretty cynical way to look at it. You got a better one? Ryan didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Ryan thought about Ava at 4 years old, walking into that place every day, navigating systems and hierarchies she didn't understand. He thought about Sophie, trying to protect kids like her and losing everything because of it. Can I ask you something else? Ryan said finally. Sure. That kid, Jamie, the one who got hurt. What happened to him? Sophie's expression softened slightly. His mom pulled him out the next day, found a different program across town. I don't blame her. And Marcus, the one who Ava helped? I don't know. I wasn't there long enough after that to find out. Sophie looked down at her mug. I think about them sometimes. Wonder how they turned out. Ryan picked up his phone, looked at the photo of Ava one more time, then set it back down. She still has that rabbit, you know, the one she used to give to Marcus. Really? Yeah, she's 7 now and she still sleeps with it every night. Won't go anywhere without it. Sophie smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I love that. Me too. Ryan felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't expected when he'd walked into this cafe an hour ago. He'd come here to escape, to disappear for a while. Instead, he'd found someone who'd seen his daughter in ways he never had. Someone who'd cared about her when he couldn't be there. Someone who'd lost something real, trying to do the right thing. Thank you, he said quietly. Sophie looked confused. For what? For seeing her, for remembering, he gestured vaguely, struggling to find the right words. For giving a damn about her when she was this tiny kid you didn't have to care about. I did have to care about her, Sophie said simply. That's the thing about kids like Ava. They make it impossible not to. Ryan felt his throat tighten again. He wasn't good at this, accepting kindness, acknowledging help, letting people in. He'd spent so long doing everything himself that he'd forgotten how to share the weight. Can I tell you something? Sophie said, her voice softer now. Yeah. When I left the center, I thought I'd never see any of those kids again. I tried not to think about them too much because it hurt. I'd wonder if Marcus still cried at drop-off, if Jamie still drew his dinosaurs, if Ava still hummed when she colored, but I figured I'd never know. That I'd just have to live with not knowing. She paused, looking directly at him. Running into you today, hearing that Ava's okay, more than okay, that she's thriving, it helps. More than you probably realize. It reminds me that the work mattered, even if it ended badly, that those kids are still out there being who they are. Ryan didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded. They talked for another 30 minutes after that, the conversation shifting to lighter things. Sophie told him more stories from the center, the time Ava tried to teach the other kids a made-up language she'd invented, the day she organized a talent show where everyone had to perform whether they wanted to or not, the way she'd appointed herself official snack distributor and took the job incredibly seriously. Ryan found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in weeks, He told Sophie about Ava now, about her obsession with space and planets, about the way she left notes all over the house with drawings and misspelled messages, about her current campaign to convince him they needed to adopt a cat, even though their lease explicitly forbade pets. Sophie asked good questions, the kind that showed she was actually listening and not just waiting for her turn to talk. She didn't offer parenting advice or make judgmental comments about the choices he'd made. She just listened, nodded, and occasionally laughed at the right moments. It felt good, easier than Ryan had expected. When he finally checked his watch, he swore under his breath, "I have to go. I'm late to pick up Ava." "Of course. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep you so long. No, this was—" Ryan stood, grabbing his jacket from the seat beside him. "This was really good. I'm glad we ran into each other." "Me too." Ryan hesitated, one hand on the back of the booth. He wanted to say something more, but he didn't know what. Thanks didn't seem like enough. Neither did goodbye. "Do you come here a lot?" he asked instead. "To this cafe?" Sophie smiled. "Sometimes. Why?" "Just wondering if I might run into you again." "You might." "Good." Ryan turned to leave, then stopped. "Hey, Sophie?" "Yeah?" "If I wanted to find you, not in a creepy way, just if I wanted to, I don't know, talk again sometime, how would I do that?" Sophie pulled a pen from her bag and grabbed a napkin from the dispenser on the table. She scribbled something on it and handed it to him. "That's my number. Text me if you want, or don't. No pressure." Ryan took the napkin, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Thanks." "Anytime." He left the cafe feeling lighter than he had in weeks, the cold evening air sharp against his face. His mind was full now, full of images and stories and possibilities he hadn't considered before. Ava at 4 years old, handing her rabbit to a crying boy. Ava at 7, humming while she colored the same way she had 3 years ago. Ava at some future age he couldn't picture yet, doing something incredible he couldn't imagine. And underneath it all, a new thought taking shape. Maybe he didn't have to carry everything alone. Maybe there were people out there, people like Sophie, who saw the same things he did and cared just as much. By the time Ryan reached his neighbor's apartment to pick up Ava, he'd made a decision. He didn't know exactly what it meant yet or where it would lead. But he knew one thing for certain. He was going to text Sophie, and he was going to find a way to bring her back into Ava's life. Because some people were worth holding on to, and Sophie Lane was definitely one of them. Ryan didn't text Sophie that night. He meant to, but by the time he got Ava home, fed, bathed, and into bed, it was past 9 and he'd collapsed on the couch with his phone in his hand and his eyes already closing. The napkin with Sophie's number stayed in his jacket pocket, folded into a small square that he touched every time he reached for his keys. 3 days passed, then 4. Each morning he'd wake up planning to send a message, and each night he'd realize he hadn't. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He did. But every time he opened a new text and stared at the blank screen, his mind went empty. What was he supposed to say? "Thanks for remembering my kid? Want to grab coffee and talk about the past?" It all sounded stupid in his head. On the 5th day, Ava made the decision for him. They were eating breakfast, cereal for her, burnt toast for him, when she looked up from her bowl with milk dripping off her spoon and said, "Dad, do you remember Miss Sophie?" Ryan nearly choked on his coffee. "What?" "Miss Sophie. From the place I used to go after school, with the toys and the books." He set his mug down carefully, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Yeah, I remember that place. Why are you asking about it?" Ava shrugged, swirling her spoon through the cereal. "I was just thinking about her. She was really nice. She used to read us stories and let me help pass out snacks." Ryan's chest tightened. "You remember her? That was years ago." "I know, but I still remember." Ava looked at him with those wide, serious eyes that always made him feel like she could see straight through him. "She gave me a sticker once. It had a rocket ship on it. I put it on my lunchbox, and it stayed there forever until it fell off." Ryan had no memory of that sticker. He had no memory of most of the small, daily details from that time in Ava's life. He'd been too busy surviving. "Why are you thinking about her now?" he asked. "I don't know. I just am." Ava went back to her cereal. "Do you think she still works there?" "I don't think so, kiddo." "How do you know?" Ryan hesitated. He could tell her the truth, that he'd run into Sophie by accident, that they'd talked for over an hour, that she'd remembered Ava in ways that had knocked the air out of his lungs. But something stopped him. He wasn't sure what Sophie would want him to say, or if bringing her up would just confuse Ava. "I just don't think she does," he said finally. "People move on to different jobs." Ava looked disappointed, but didn't push it. She finished her cereal in silence, then carried her bowl to the sink and stood on her tiptoes to rinse it out. She was getting taller. He noticed it in moments like this. How she didn't need the step stool anymore. How her pajama pants were starting to ride up above her ankles. After he dropped her off at school, Ryan sat in his truck in the parking lot and pulled out his phone. The napkin was still in his jacket pocket, soft from being handled. He unfolded it and stared at the number written in blue ink, slightly smudged. Before he could overthink it, he typed out a message. "Hey, it's Ryan. From the cafe. Ava asked about you this morning, just thought you should know." He hit send before he could delete it and immediately regretted the wording. Too casual? Too heavy? He had no idea. He shoved the phone into his pocket and drove to work, trying not to think about it. The response came during his lunch break. "She did? That's so sweet. How is she?" Ryan stared at the message, relief flooding through him. She'd responded. She sounded happy to hear from him. He wasn't being weird. "She's good. Still kind. Still shares everything. Still sleeps with that rabbit." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "I'd love to hear more about her sometime, if you want to talk again." Ryan's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. This was it. He could say yes and open a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. Or he could say something vague and non-committal and let the conversation die. He thought about Ava's face that morning, the way she'd lit up just talking about a woman she hadn't seen in 3 years. He thought about Sophie sitting across from him in that cafe, telling him stories about his daughter that he'd never known. "Want to meet up this weekend? Maybe coffee again?" The response came fast. "I'd like that. Saturday afternoon? Works for me." They made plans to meet at the same cafe, same time, same booth, if it was available. Ryan felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless for days. When Saturday came, he almost brought Ava with him, but at the last minute he decided against it. He wanted to talk to Sophie first, to figure out what this was and what it meant before involving his daughter. So he dropped Ava off at his neighbor's again, Mrs. Chen, who loved having her over and never minded the short notice, and drove to the cafe alone. Sophie was already there when he arrived, sitting in the same corner booth, wearing jeans and a dark green sweater. She looked up when he walked in and smiled, and Ryan felt the tension he'd been carrying all morning ease just slightly. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hey yourself." They ordered coffee, black for him, something complicated with oat milk for her, and settled into the kind of small talk that felt necessary before getting to anything real. The weather, traffic, how the week had been. It was awkward at first, both of them feeling around the edges of what they were doing here. Then Sophie said, "So Ava asked about me?" Ryan nodded. "Out of nowhere. We were eating breakfast and she just brought you up. Asked if you still worked at the center. What did you tell her?" "That I didn't think so, that people move on." He paused. "I didn't tell her I'd run into you. I wasn't sure if I should." Sophie looked thoughtful. "Why not?" "I don't know. I guess I didn't want to get her hopes up if this was just..." He gestured vaguely between them. "If this was just a one-time thing." "Is that what you think it is?" Ryan met her eyes. "I don't know what it is." Sophie smiled, not unkindly. "Fair enough." They were quiet for a moment, both of them sipping their coffee. Then Sophie said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What was it like? Raising her alone from the start?" The question caught Ryan off guard. Most people asked about Ava's mom, where she was, why she left, whether she was coming back. But Sophie was asking about him. "Hard," he said honestly. "Really hard. Especially in the beginning when she was little and I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody knows what they're doing in the beginning." "Yeah, but most people have a partner to figure it out with. I was just..." He stopped, searching for the right words. "I was just winging it, all the time, hoping I wasn't screwing her up too badly." "You didn't screw her up." "How do you know?" "Because I met her when she was 4, and she was already an incredible kid. That doesn't happen by accident." Ryan looked down at his coffee, uncomfortable with the praise. "I worked a lot. Too much, probably. There were whole chunks of her life I missed because I was trying to keep us afloat." But you kept her fed, kept a roof over her head, kept her safe. Sophie's voice was gentle but firm. That's not nothing, Ryan. It feels like nothing sometimes. I know. And somehow he believed that she did know, that she understood what it was like to give everything you had and still feel like it wasn't enough. Can I ask you something now? Ryan said. Go ahead. What have you been doing since you left the center? For work, I mean. Sophie's expression shifted, became more guarded. Odd jobs, mostly. I worked at a bookstore for a while. Did some freelance tutoring. Right now I'm waiting tables at a diner downtown. You liked working with kids, though. Why not find another program? I tried. Sophie's voice went flat. Turns out when you get fired from one nonprofit, other nonprofits aren't super eager to hire you. Doesn't matter that I was right. Doesn't matter that I was protecting kids. All they see is someone who caused problems. Ryan felt anger rise in his chest again, the same anger he'd felt when she first told him what happened. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's how it works. Sophie shrugged. I applied to maybe 15 different youth programs over the past 3 years. Didn't get a single call back. Eventually, I stopped trying. So you just gave up? The words came out harsher than he intended. Sophie's eyes flashed. I didn't give up. I got realistic. Her voice had an edge now. I have rent to pay and bills to cover just like everyone else. I can't afford to keep applying for jobs that won't hire me. So yeah, I wait tables. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me fed. Ryan held up his hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Sophie took a breath, visibly pulling herself back. No, I'm sorry. I get defensive about it. People act like I should have just fought harder. Like if I really cared, I would have found a way. But they don't know what it's like to send out application after application and hear nothing back. I get it, Ryan said quietly. I've been there. Different reasons, but I've been there. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Sophie said, Can we talk about something else? Yeah, what do you want to talk about? Tell me more about Ava. What's she into these days? Ryan felt himself relax slightly. This he could do. He told Sophie about Ava's obsession with space, about the library books stacked on her nightstand, about the way she'd started making up constellations and giving them names like the Sleeping Dragon and the Lost Sock. Sophie laughed, the tension from earlier dissolving. That sounds exactly like something she'd do. She wants to be an astronaut or a scientist. She changes her mind every other day. She'll probably end up being both. Probably. Ryan smiled. She's got this notebook where she writes down questions, things she wants to figure out, like why do we yawn, or where does wind come from, or how do birds know which way to fly? Does she find the answers? Sometimes. We look stuff up together. Other times she just writes, still thinking, and moves on to the next question. Sophie's expression softened. You're a good dad, Ryan. He shook his head. I'm just doing my best. That's what good dads do. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just looked at her. Really looked at her. She had smile lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that meant she'd spent a lot of time being happy even if things were hard now. Her hands were wrapped around her coffee mug the same way they'd been the first time he met her, like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Can I tell you something? He said. Sure. I haven't talked to anyone like this in a long time. About Ava, about life, any of it. It feels good. Sophie smiled. I was just thinking the same thing. They stayed for another hour, the conversation wandering from topic to topic with an ease that surprised them both. Sophie told him about the bookstore where she used to work, how she'd loved the smell of old paperbacks and the quiet rhythm of shelving returns. Ryan told her about the warehouse, about the guys he worked with who gave him shit for packing his lunch every day, but secretly respected that he was always on time. At some point, the conversation turned back to the community center. Sophie seemed more willing to talk about it now, less defensive. There were good days too, she said. It wasn't all bad. There was this one afternoon when we did a talent show, and this tiny girl got up and sang the entire alphabet backwards without making a single mistake. Everyone went wild. It was the best thing I'd ever seen. Was Ava in that talent show? Oh yeah, she did magic tricks. Terrible magic tricks where you could totally see how she was doing them, but she sold it so hard that everyone clapped anyway. Ryan laughed, trying to picture it. I wish I could have seen that. You would have loved it. I'm sure I would have. Sophie looked at him for a long moment, then said carefully, "You know, you could see her do stuff like that now, if you made time." "I try, it's just hard with work and everything else." "I know, but she won't be 7 forever. Pretty soon she'll be a teenager who doesn't want to hang out with you at all." Ryan felt the truth of that settle over him like a weight. "Yeah, you're right. I'm not trying to lecture you, I just—" Sophie paused, choosing her words. "I see a lot of parents at the diner. They come in with their kids and spend the whole meal on their phones. The kids are right there, trying to talk to them, and they just nod without listening. And I always think, you're going to blink and they're going to be gone, and you're going to wonder where the time went." Ryan's throat felt tight. "I don't want to be that parent." "Then don't be." It sounded so simple when she said it, like it was just a choice he could make. But Ryan knew it wasn't that easy. There were bills to pay and shifts to cover and a million small fires that needed putting out every single day. But maybe Sophie was right. Maybe he needed to try harder. "Okay," he said. "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll try to be more present, make more time." Sophie smiled. "Good." They finished their coffee and stood to leave. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray, clouds rolling in from the east. Ryan walked Sophie to her car. An old Honda with a dented bumper and a parking sticker from 2 years ago still stuck to the windshield. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. "Thanks for texting." They stood there for a moment, neither of them quite ready to leave. Then Ryan said, "Can I ask you something?" "You keep asking if you can ask me things. You know you can just ask, right?" He smiled. "Would you want to meet Ava? Like, actually see her again?" Sophie's face went still. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, I mean, only if you want to. No pressure. But she asked about you, and I think it would mean a lot to her." "It would mean a lot to me, too." Sophie's voice was soft. "Are you sure, though? I don't want to complicate things." "You're not complicating anything. You're—" Ryan paused, trying to find the right words. "You're someone who cared about my kid when I couldn't be there. That matters. I want her to know that." Sophie's eyes were bright now, like she was holding back tears. "Okay. Yes. I'd love to see her." "How about next weekend? We could do something low-key. Maybe the park or something." "That sounds perfect." They made plans to meet the following Saturday at the park near Ryan's apartment, the one with the good swings where he'd taken the photo Sophie had recognized. Ryan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness that he couldn't quite name. As he drove home, his mind raced through everything that could go wrong. What if Ava didn't remember Sophie as clearly as she'd seemed to? What if it was awkward? What if he was making a mistake bringing someone from the past into their present? But underneath all the worry was something else. Hope, maybe. Or just the belief that some people were worth the risk. When he picked Ava up from Mrs. Chen's, she was in the middle of a game with the older woman's grandson, both of them building some kind of fortress out of couch cushions. She barely looked up when he arrived. "5 more minutes?" she asked. "Sure, kiddo." Mrs. Chen brought him tea while he waited, settling into her armchair with a knowing look. "You seem lighter today." "Do I?" "Mm-hmm." "Good lighter, not fever lighter," Ryan laughed. "I met up with a friend, someone I ran into last week." "A friend or a lady friend?" "Just a friend, Mrs. Chen." "Mm-hmm." She didn't sound convinced. "Well, friends are good too. You should have more of them." "Why is everyone suddenly concerned about my social life?" "Because you don't have one." She said it matter-of-factly, no judgment, just observation. "You work and you take care of Ava, and that's it. That's not enough for a whole life." "It's enough for now. If you say so." When they got home that night, Ryan made spaghetti while Ava did her homework at the kitchen table. She was working on a math worksheet, her tongue poking out in concentration, the way it always did when she was focused. "Hey, Ava." "Yeah? Remember how you asked about Miss Sophie from the after-school place?" Ava looked up, her eyes widening. "Yeah? What if I told you I ran into her, and that she wants to see you again?" Ava's whole face transformed. "Really? When? Where is she?" "Next Saturday, at the park." "Would you want that?" "Yes!" Ava practically shouted it. "Oh my gosh, yes. Does she remember me?" "She remembers you really well, actually. She told me all these stories about stuff you used to do." "Like what?" Ryan sat down across from her, abandoning the pasta for a moment. "Like how you used to let other kids hold your rabbit when they were sad." And how you hummed when you colored. Ava looked embarrassed and pleased at the same time. I still hum when I color. I know you do. Did she say anything else? She said you were kind, that you looked after the other kids. Ava shrugged like it was no big deal, but Ryan could see she was happy. I just didn't like it when people were sad. That's what makes you special, kiddo. Do you think she'll like me now? I'm not little anymore. Ryan felt his chest tighten. She's gonna love you now, just like she did then. Ava smiled and went back to her math, but Ryan could tell she was distracted. She kept glancing up at him like she wanted to ask more questions, but didn't know where to start. That night after Ava was asleep, Ryan texted Sophie. I told her she's really excited. The response came quickly. Me too. I'm also terrified. Why? What if she doesn't remember me as well as she thinks she does? What if I'm not what she's expecting? Ryan understood that fear completely. He'd felt it himself earlier. She'll remember. And even if she doesn't, you'll make new memories. That's what matters. You're very wise for someone who burns toast. He laughed out loud, startling himself with the sound. Who told you I burn toast? Lucky guess. They texted for another 20 minutes, the conversation easy and wandering. Ryan couldn't remember the last time he'd done this. Just talk to someone for the sake of talking. No agenda, no purpose beyond enjoying the exchange. When he finally said goodnight and plugged his phone in to charge, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite happiness. Not yet. But something close to it. The week dragged. Every day felt twice as long as it should have been. Ava asked about Sophie constantly, what she looked like now, what they were going to do at the park, whether she should bring her rabbit to show her. Ryan answered as best he could, but mostly he just tried to keep Ava from exploding with anticipation. He texted Sophie a few times during the week. Nothing heavy, just small updates. Ava drew a picture for her. Ava picked out her outfit for Saturday 3 days in advance. Ava made him promise they wouldn't be late. Sophie responded with her own nervous updates. She'd changed her mind about what to wear 4 times. She'd bought a small gift, but then worried it was too much. She barely slept the night before. When Saturday finally arrived, Ryan woke up before his alarm and couldn't fall back asleep. He made coffee, then paced around the kitchen, drinking it too fast and checking the clock every 5 minutes. Ava was up early too, already dressed and sitting on the couch with her rabbit in her lap. Is it time yet? She asked for the 3rd time. Not yet, kiddo. Another hour. Why does time go so slow when you're waiting? I don't know. One of life's great mysteries. They ate breakfast in near silence, both of them too anxious to talk. Ryan kept running through scenarios in his head. What he'd say when he saw Sophie, how he'd introduce her to Ava, what they'd do if the conversation stalled. Finally, mercifully, it was time to go. The park was a 10-minute drive, but Ryan took it slow, partly because he was nervous, and partly because Ava kept asking him to check if her hair looked okay. You look great, he said for the 5th time. Are you sure? I'm sure. What if she doesn't recognize me? She will. How do you know? Because you have the same smile you did when you were 4, and because some people are impossible to forget. Ava seemed satisfied with that answer. When they pulled into the parking lot, Ryan saw Sophie standing near the swings, wearing jeans and a blue jacket, her hands in her pockets. She looked just as nervous as he felt. He parked and turned to Ava. You ready? Ava nodded, clutching her rabbit tight. They got out of the truck and walked toward the swings. Sophie saw them coming and straightened up, a smile breaking across her face, even as her eyes went bright with what might have been tears. And then Ava did something Ryan didn't expect. She ran. Not a careful walk or a hesitant approach, but a full-on sprint, her rabbit bouncing in her arms, her shoes kicking up dust from the path. Sophie dropped to one knee just in time to catch her. Miss Sophie! Ava crashed into her with the kind of hug that had no self-consciousness, no holding back. Sophie wrapped her arms around Ava and held on tight, her eyes squeezed shut. Hi, sweetheart. Hi. Ryan stood a few feet back, watching them, and felt something break open in his chest. This was what mattered, not the jobs or the bills or the endless scramble to keep everything together. This moment, right here, where 2 people who'd cared about each other years ago found their way back. Sophie looked up at him over Ava's shoulder, tears streaming down her face now, and mouthed two words. "Thank you." Ryan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Ava pulled back just enough to look at Sophie's face. "You look the same," Sophie laughed, wiping her eyes. "You don't. You got so big." "I'm 7 now." "I know. Your dad told me." Ava turned to Ryan, her face glowing. "Dad, it's really her." "I know, kiddo. Can we go on the swings? Will you push me like you used to?" Sophie stood, still holding Ava's hand. "I would love to." They walked to the swings together, Ava chattering the entire way about school and space and her rabbit and everything else that came into her head. Sophie listened with complete attention, nodding and asking questions and laughing in all the right places. Ryan followed a few steps behind, watching them, and thought about all the moments he'd missed when Ava was younger. All the times he'd been somewhere else, working, surviving, doing what he had to do. But maybe Sophie was right. Maybe those moments hadn't been wasted. Maybe his absence had made space for other people to step in and care for his daughter in ways he couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let people help carry the weight. Sophie pushed Ava on the swing, and Ava's laughter rang out across the park, clear and bright. Ryan sat down on a nearby bench and let himself just watch. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about what came next or what he should be doing or how he was going to make everything work. He was just here, present, and it felt like enough. They stayed at the park for 2 hours. Ava showed Sophie how high she could swing now, how she could pump her legs without needing anyone to push her. She dragged Sophie to the monkey bars and demonstrated her ability to cross all the way across without falling. She pointed out the spot where she'd once found a caterpillar and kept it in a jar for 3 days before Ryan made her let it go. Sophie absorbed every detail, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, and giving Ava the kind of undivided attention that made the little girl glow. Ryan watched from the bench, occasionally chiming in, but mostly just letting them reconnect. It felt natural, watching them together, like puzzle pieces that had been separated for too long finally sliding back into place. Eventually, Ava got thirsty and they walked to the convenience store across the street. Ryan bought juice boxes and a bag of chips they shared while sitting on the curb outside. Ava sat between them, swinging her legs and talking about her latest obsession with black holes. "They're like giant space vacuums," she explained seriously. "They suck everything in and nothing can escape, not even light." "That sounds terrifying," Sophie said. "It's not terrifying, it's cool. Scientists don't even know what happens inside them. It's a mystery." "Do you want to solve that mystery someday?" Ava considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll discover a new planet. I haven't decided yet." Sophie smiled at Ryan over Ava's head. He smiled back, feeling something warm settle in his chest. After they finished the chips, Ava suddenly turned to Sophie with a serious expression. "Miss Sophie, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you stop coming to the center? Did you get a different job?" Ryan tensed. They hadn't talked about how to handle this question, and he had no idea what Sophie would say. He watched her face carefully, looking for signs of discomfort or hesitation. But Sophie didn't flinch. She looked at Ava thoughtfully, like she was considering how to answer honestly without saying too much. "I did leave for a different reason," Sophie said slowly. "There were some grown-up problems at the center. Problems about fairness and how kids were being treated. I tried to fix them, but the people in charge didn't want to listen, so I had to leave." Ava frowned. "That doesn't seem fair." It wasn't, but sometimes things aren't fair and you have to decide what matters more. Staying in a place that's broken or leaving and hoping you can do good somewhere else. "Did you do good somewhere else?" Sophie's smile was sad. "I'm still working on that part." Ava seemed to accept this answer. She leaned against Sophie's shoulder, casual and comfortable, like they'd never been apart. "I'm glad you're here now." Sophie's voice went thick. "Me too, sweetheart." Ryan felt his throat tighten. He looked away, blinking hard against the sudden pressure behind his eyes. They walked back to the park and found a picnic table in the shade. Ava climbed up and sat cross-legged, pulling her rabbit into her lap. She started telling Sophie about school, about her teacher Mrs. Ramirez, who let them do science experiments every Friday, about her best friend Maya, who could do a cartwheel and was teaching Ava how. Sophie listened with the same focused attention she'd shown all afternoon, but Ryan noticed something else now, something he hadn't seen before. Every time Ava mentioned something good, a friend, a teacher, an experience, Sophie's expression would flicker with something that looked almost like pain. It took him a moment to understand what he was seeing. Guilt. Sophie felt guilty. After a while, Ava spotted a group of kids playing kickball on the far side of the park and asked if she could join them. Ryan checked with the parents supervising, got the okay, and watched Ava run off with her rabbit tucked under her arm like a talisman. He sat back down across from Sophie. She was watching Ava too, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" Ryan asked. Sophie didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "She's amazing." "Yeah, she is. You did that. You raised her to be that person." Ryan shook his head. "I told you before, I was barely around back then. I was working all the time. But you kept her safe. You kept her fed and clothed and loved. That's what mattered." "Is it?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Because listening to her talk about school and friends and all these experiences she's having now, I keep thinking about how much I missed when she was little. How many moments like this I wasn't there for. Sophie looked at him directly. "You're here now." "Yeah, but Ryan," her voice was firm. "You're here now. That's what counts." He wanted to believe her, but the guilt was still there, sitting heavy in his chest. "I keep thinking about what you said. About that kid Marcus, and how Ava helped him. I should have known about that. I should have been paying attention. You were surviving. There's no shame in that." "Feels like there should be." Sophie was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming on the picnic table. Then she said, "Can I tell you something?" "Sure. I've spent the last 3 years feeling like I failed those kids. Like I should have fought harder, should have found a way to stay, should have protected them better. Every night I'd lie awake thinking about Marcus and Jamie and all the others, wondering if they were okay, wondering if they remembered me." She paused, watching Ava kick the ball and run to first base, her rabbit bouncing in her arms. "But seeing Ava today, seeing how she turned out, it helps. It reminds me that maybe I didn't fail completely, that maybe the time I did have with them mattered, even if it ended badly." Ryan felt something shift inside him. "You didn't fail them, Sophie. Then neither did you. We both did the best we could with what we had. That has to be enough." They sat in silence for a while, watching the kickball game. Ava was running the bases now, laughing as she slid into home plate in a cloud of dust. The other kids cheered, and Ava stood up grinning, covered in dirt. "She's going to need a bath tonight," Ryan said. Sophie laughed. "Worth it, though." "Yeah." When the game broke up, Ava came running back, breathless and happy. "Did you see me slide?" "I saw," Ryan said. "Very impressive. I got dirt in my shoes." "I noticed." Ava plopped down on the bench next to Sophie, still breathing hard. "Miss Sophie, can I ask you another question?" "Always." "Are you going to come back? Like, to see us again?" Sophie glanced at Ryan, uncertainty crossing her face. He gave a small nod. "I'd really like that," Sophie said carefully. "If it's okay with your dad." "It's okay with me," Ryan said. Ava's whole face lit up. "Really? Really? Can she come to our house? I want to show her my room and my space books and my planet drawings." Ryan felt a small flutter of anxiety. Their apartment was small and cluttered and definitely not impressive. But Sophie was looking at him with hopeful eyes, and Ava was practically vibrating with excitement. "Sure," he said. "If Sophie wants to." "I'd love to," Sophie said immediately. So they drove back to the apartment, Ava chattering the entire way about everything she wanted to show Sophie. Ryan felt self-conscious pulling into the parking lot of their building, which needed a fresh coat of paint and had a perpetually broken streetlight out front. Their apartment was on the second floor, accessible by an outdoor staircase that creaked under their feet. He unlocked the door and gestured for Sophie to go ahead. "It's not much," he said, more defensive than he meant to sound. Sophie stepped inside and looked around. The living room was small, the furniture mismatched and worn, but there were drawings taped to the walls. Ava's artwork, colorful and chaotic. Books were stacked on every available surface. A blanket fort was still set up in the corner from last weekend. "I love it," Sophie said simply. Ava grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the bedroom they'd pass on the way down the hall. "This is my room. Come see." Ryan stayed in the living room, giving them space. He could hear Ava's voice rising and falling with excitement as she showed Sophie her bookshelf, her star chart, her collection of rocks she'd found at various parks. Sophie made appreciative noises, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested in every detail. Ryan sat down on the couch and let out a long breath. His apartment was in his space, and having Sophie here felt both right and terrifying, like he was letting her see parts of his life he usually kept hidden. After about 20 minutes, they emerged from Ava's room. Ava was carrying 3 books she wanted Sophie to borrow, and Sophie was carrying them carefully like they were precious. "Your daughter has excellent taste in reading material," Sophie said. "She gets it from the library. I think she's checked out every astronomy book they have." "Twice," Ava added proudly. They settled in the living room, Ava showing Sophie various treasures, the cool rock she'd found, the drawing she'd made of Jupiter's moons, the rabbit that had been through so much with her. Sophie examined each item with serious attention, asking questions and making comments that showed she was really listening. Ryan made them all grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, burning the first batch and having to start over. Sophie and Ava didn't seem to mind. They ate at the small kitchen table, Ava monopolizing the conversation with stories about school and friends and her ongoing campaign to get Ryan to let her have a pet. "I've explained to her at least 50 times that our lease doesn't allow pets," Ryan said. "But if we moved somewhere that did allow pets, then could I get a cat?" Ava asked, like this was a brilliant loophole. "We're not moving, kiddo." "But what if we did?" "Then we'd talk about it." Ava looked at Sophie. "That means no." Sophie laughed. "I got that." After dinner, Ava convinced Sophie to help her build a new blanket fort. Ryan watched from the couch as they draped sheets over chairs and used books to anchor the corners. They were laughing, both of them, their heads bent together as they worked. It struck him how easy this was, how natural. Like Sophie had always been part of their lives and was just coming back to where she belonged. That thought scared him more than he wanted to admit. Eventually, Ava's energy started to flag. Her movements got slower, her sentences trailing off mid-thought. Ryan checked the time and realized it was past her bedtime. "All right, kiddo, time to get ready for bed." "But Miss Sophie is still here," Ava protested weakly. "Miss Sophie will come back another time. Say goodnight." Ava hugged Sophie hard, wrapping her arms around her waist and holding on. "Thank you for coming to see me." Sophie hugged her back just as tightly. "Thank you for remembering me." "I could never forget you." Sophie's eyes went bright again. "I could never forget you either, sweetheart." Ryan walked Ava to her room, helped her brush her teeth, and tucked her into bed with her rabbit. She was asleep before he even turned off the light. When he came back to the living room, Sophie was sitting on the couch, looking at the drawings on the wall. She glanced up when he entered. "She's out cold," Ryan said. "I'm not surprised. That was a big day for her." "For all of us," Sophie smiled. "Yeah." Ryan sat down on the other end of the couch, suddenly aware of how quiet the apartment was with just the two of them. "Thanks for coming. It meant a lot to her." "It meant a lot to me, too." Sophie paused, then added softly, "I didn't realize how much I missed this. Being around kids, being part of their lives, I forgot what it felt like. You're really good with her. She makes it easy." They were quiet for a moment. Then Sophie said, "Ryan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you want me to see her again? I mean, I'm grateful, don't get me wrong, but you didn't have to do this. You could have just told her I moved away or something." Ryan considered the question. "Because she asked about you, and because you remembered her when you didn't have to, because—" He stopped, trying to find the right words. "Because I think maybe I've been doing this alone for too long, and maybe it's okay to let people in." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. "That's a big step." "I know." "Are you sure you're ready for it?" "No," he said honestly, "but I'm going to try anyway." Sophie smiled, and there was something vulnerable in it. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. You barely know me. I know you raised an incredible kid mostly by yourself. I know you work hard and you show up and you care. That's more than a lot of people can say." Ryan felt his chest tighten. He wasn't used to this. People seeing the good in him instead of just the ways he was falling short. "Can I be honest with you?" he asked. "Please. I'm scared I'm going to mess this up. You being here, being part of Ava's life again, I don't want to make promises I can't keep." "I'm not asking for promises," Sophie said. "I'm just asking to be here, however that looks." What if it gets complicated? Then it gets complicated. We'll figure it out. Ryan looked at her, this woman who'd cared about his daughter years ago and was willing to step back into their messy, imperfect lives. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Sophie seemed to consider the question carefully. Because I've spent 3 years feeling like I failed those kids. Like everything I did at the center didn't matter because it ended badly. But seeing Ava today, seeing that she's okay, better than okay, it reminds me that the work mattered, that the time I spent with her mattered, and I need that reminder right now. So this is for you as much as for her. Maybe. Is that selfish? No, Ryan said. It's honest. Sophie looked relieved. I don't want to overstep. I don't want to push my way into your lives if you don't want me here. But if there's room for me, even just a little, I'd like to be here. For Ava. And for you, if you'll let me. Ryan felt something crack open inside him, something that had been sealed shut for a long time. The part of him that knew how to trust people, how to let them help carry the weight. There's room, he said. Sophie's smile was tremulous. Yeah? Yeah. Oh. They sat in comfortable silence for a while after that. Sophie asked about his work, about his day-to-day life, about how he managed everything. Ryan found himself talking more than he usually did, telling her about the warehouse and his coworkers, and the small moments that made the grind bearable. Sophie told him about the diner where she worked, about the regular customers who came in every morning and ordered the same thing, about the cook who told terrible jokes and made her laugh despite herself. She talked about the bookstore where she used to work and how much she missed being surrounded by stories. Why'd you leave? Ryan asked. It closed down. Couldn't compete with online retailers. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, but he could hear the disappointment underneath. I was there for almost a year. Best job I ever had. Better than the center? Sophie thought about this. Different. The center was harder but more meaningful. The bookstore was easier but less important. I don't know which I preferred. Maybe you can find something that's both, meaningful and manageable. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. Ryan wanted to say something encouraging, something that would make her believe things could get better. But he didn't know how. He was still figuring that out for himself. Eventually, Sophie glanced at the time and stood up. I should go. It's getting late. Ryan walked her to the door, feeling reluctant for the evening to end. Thanks again for today, really. Thank you for inviting me. Sophie paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Can I ask you one more thing before I go? Sure. What made you text me? After that first time at the cafe, I thought maybe it was just a one-time thing, but you reached out. Ryan shrugged, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Ava asked about you, and I realized I wanted to see you again too. Why? Because talking to you is easy. Because you see Ava the way I do. Because... He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Sophie waited, patient. Because I'm tired of doing everything alone, he said finally. And you feel like someone who gets that. Sophie's expression softened. I do get that. They stood there for a moment, neither of them moving. Then Sophie reached out and squeezed his hand briefly before letting go. I'll see you soon, she said. Yeah, soon. She left, and Ryan stood in the doorway watching her walk down the stairs and across the parking lot to her car. She waved before getting in, and he waved back. When he closed the door and turned around, the apartment felt different. Not emptier exactly. Just different. Like Sophie's presence had shifted something, rearranged the molecules in the air. Ryan cleaned up the dinner dishes, took down the blanket fort, and straightened the living room. His mind kept circling back to the day, to the look on Ava's face when she'd seen Sophie, to the easy way they'd talked and laughed together. He checked on Ava before going to bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, one arm thrown over her rabbit, her mouth slightly open. Ryan stood in the doorway watching her sleep, feeling the familiar mix of love and fear that parenthood always brought. She was growing up so fast. Soon she'd be 8, then 10, then a teenager who didn't need him as much. And he was still figuring out how to be the parent she deserved. But maybe Sophie was right. Maybe he didn't have to figure it all out alone. That night, lying in bed, Ryan pulled out his phone and sent Sophie a text. Thanks for today. Ava hasn't stopped talking about you. The response came a few minutes later. I haven't stopped thinking about her either. Or you. Ryan stared at those last two words. Or you. He didn't know what to make of that. Didn't know if it meant something or if he was reading too much into it. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on something simple. Same here. He put his phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, his mind too active for sleep. Today had been good. Better than good. But it had also opened up questions he didn't have answers for. What did it mean to let Sophie into their lives? How much space should he make for her? What if Ava got attached and then Sophie disappeared again? What if he got attached? That last question scared him more than he wanted to admit. Ryan had been alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone else in his corner. Someone who cared about the same things he did, who saw his daughter the way he saw her, who didn't judge him for all the ways he was barely holding it together. It felt dangerous, letting himself want that, letting himself hope for it. But it also felt inevitable. He thought about the way Sophie had hugged Ava at the park, the tears in her eyes, the genuine joy on her face. He thought about her sitting at his kitchen table eating burned grilled cheese and not complaining. He thought about the way she'd looked at the drawings on his walls and said she loved his apartment, and actually meant it. She fit. That was the terrifying part. She fit into their lives like she'd always been there. Ryan turned over, punching his pillow into a more comfortable shape, and tried to quiet his mind. Tomorrow was Sunday. He and Ava usually did laundry and grocery shopping and all the mundane tasks that kept life running. Normal things, safe things. But part of him wanted to text Sophie and ask if she wanted to come over again, to make pancakes together, or go to the library, or just exist in the same space. He didn't send the text. Not yet. But he thought about it as he finally drifted off to sleep. And when he dreamed, it was of possibilities he hadn't let himself imagine in years. The next morning, Ava woke him up by jumping on his bed. "Dad! Dad! Can we call Miss Sophie and invite her over?" Ryan groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. "It's 7 in the morning on a Sunday, kiddo." "So?" "I'm awake." "You're awake. We should call her. Sophie is probably still sleeping like normal people do on weekends." Ava flopped down next to him, undeterred. "Can we call her later then?" Ryan moved the pillow and looked at his daughter. Her hair was sticking up in every direction, and she had sleep creases on her cheek, but her eyes were bright with hope. "Maybe," he said. "Let's see how the day goes." "That means yes." "That means maybe." Ava grinned like she knew she'd already won. They made breakfast together, waffles that came out slightly burned because Ryan got distracted, and ate them while Ava planned out all the things she wanted to do with Sophie. Ryan listened, making non-committal sounds, but inside he was already composing the text he'd send later. Around noon, after they'd done laundry and cleaned the apartment, Ryan finally pulled out his phone. "Ava wants to know if you want to come over again. No pressure, she's just excited." He hit send before he could overthink it. The response came fast. "I'd love to." "When?" Ryan looked at Ava, who was watching him with barely contained excitement. "She said yes," he told her. Ava literally jumped in the air. "Yes, when is she coming?" Ryan texted back. "Today? This afternoon? Perfect. I'll bring lunch." And just like that, Sophie was coming back. Ryan felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness that he couldn't quite name. Ava spent the next hour cleaning her room without being asked, organizing her books, making sure everything was perfect. Ryan watched her work, amazed by how much effort she was putting in. "She's already seen your room, you know," he said. "I know, but I want it to be nice." When Sophie arrived, she was carrying bags of sandwiches from a deli downtown and a container of cookies she'd baked that morning. Ava answered the door and immediately hugged her. "You're here! I'm here," Sophie said, laughing. They ate lunch at the kitchen table, Ava dominating the conversation again, but Sophie seeming perfectly happy to let her. After lunch, Ava dragged Sophie back to her room to show her the reorganized bookshelf. Ryan cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift down the hall. He felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless for years. This was what he'd been missing. Not just help with Ava, but companionship, connection. Someone who wanted to be here not out of obligation, but because they genuinely cared. When Sophie and Ava emerged from the bedroom, Ava had a new plan. "Can we make cookies together? Miss Sophie brought some, but I want to make them from scratch." Sophie looked at Ryan. "Is that okay?" "Sure, if you're up for it." "I'm up for it." So they spent the afternoon in the kitchen, making chocolate chip cookies from a recipe Sophie knew by heart. Ava helped measure ingredients, spilling flour everywhere and getting chocolate on her face. Ryan mostly stayed out of the way, watching them work together. At one point, Sophie looked over at him and smiled, and Ryan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. He was in trouble. He knew it. But for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a bad thing. The cookies came out perfect, golden brown with pools of melted chocolate still soft in the centers. Ava ate 3 before Ryan told her that was enough, and Sophie packed the rest into a container for them to keep. They sat around the kitchen table with glasses of milk, Ava swinging her legs and talking about a science project she had coming up at school. "We have to make a model of the solar system," she explained. "I want to make mine really accurate, with all the right colors and sizes and everything." "That sounds ambitious," Sophie said. "I can help you with that, kiddo," Ryan offered. Ava looked skeptical. "No offense, Dad, but you're not great at art stuff." Sophie laughed, nearly choking on her milk. Ryan tried to look offended, but couldn't quite pull it off. "She's not wrong," he admitted. "I could help," Sophie said. "If you want." Ava's face lit up. "Really? You'd help me?" "Of course. When's it due?" 2 weeks from Friday." Sophie glanced at Ryan, checking for permission. He nodded. "Then we'll make the best solar system model your class has ever seen," Sophie said. Ava practically vibrated with excitement. "Can we start planning it now?" "Not tonight," Ryan interjected. "It's getting late and you have school tomorrow." Ava looked like she wanted to argue, but settled for a dramatic sigh instead. "Fine. But can Miss Sophie come back this week so we can work on it?" "If she wants to," Ryan said. Sophie smiled. "I want to." After Ava went to bed that night, Ryan and Sophie sat in the living room with mugs of tea, the apartment quiet around them. Sophie had her feet tucked under her on the couch, and Ryan sat in the armchair across from her, feeling more relaxed than he had in months. "Thank you for offering to help with the project," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to. Besides, it'll be fun." "You might regret saying that when we're covered in paint and papier-mâché at 11 o'clock at night trying to finish it." Sophie laughed. "I've survived worse." They were quiet for a moment, both of them sipping their tea. Then Sophie said, "Can I ask you something that might be too personal?" Ryan tensed slightly but nodded. "Go ahead." "Do you ever hear from Ava's mom?" The question hit harder than he expected. Ryan set his mug down on the side table, buying himself time to figure out how to answer. "No," he said finally. "Not since she left. She made it pretty clear she didn't want anything to do with us." "I'm sorry, that must have been hard." "It was. Still is sometimes." Ryan looked down at his hands. "Ava asks about her occasionally. Wants to know why she left, if she ever thinks about her, if she'll come back. I try to be honest without making her feel like it was her fault." "It wasn't her fault." "I know that. But try explaining that to a 7-year-old who thinks maybe if she'd been a better baby, her mom would have stayed." Sophie's face crumpled. "She thinks that?" "She did for a while. We've talked about it a lot. I think she understands now that it wasn't about her, that her mom just wasn't ready to be a parent and made a choice." Ryan's voice went hard. "A shitty choice, but a choice." "Do you hate her, Ava's mom?" Ryan considered this. "I used to. For the first year after she left, I was so angry I could barely see straight, but then I realized the anger was just making everything harder, so I let it go. Or most of it, anyway. That takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of exhaustion. I was too tired to stay angry." Sophie reached over and touched his arm briefly, a gesture of comfort that made Ryan's throat tight. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you're doing an incredible job. Ava is happy and healthy and kind. That doesn't happen by accident." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true, and because I think you need to hear it." Ryan wanted to argue, to deflect the compliment like he usually did, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the sincerity in Sophie's voice, or maybe he was just tired of fighting against people trying to see the good in him. "Thank you," he said quietly. They talked for another hour, the conversation meandering through topics both light and heavy. Sophie told him about her family, a younger brother in Seattle she rarely saw, parents who'd retired to Florida and called once a month. Ryan told her about growing up in Ohio, about leaving home at 18 with nothing but a duffel bag and a determination to make something of himself. "Did you?" Sophie asked. "Make something of yourself?" Ryan looked around the small apartment, at the mismatched furniture and the drawings on the walls, and the life he'd built from nothing. I think so. Maybe not in the way I expected, but yeah, I did. You should be proud of that. I'm working on it. When Sophie finally left that night, Ryan stood in the doorway watching her go, feeling the same reluctance he'd felt the night before. The apartment felt too quiet without her, too empty. He checked on Ava, who was sound asleep with her rabbit clutched to her chest, then went to his own room. His phone buzzed as he was getting ready for bed. Made it home. Thanks for today. I needed it. Ryan smiled and typed back. We needed it too. See you this week for solar system planning? Looking forward to it. He plugged his phone in and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the day. The cookies, the laughter, the easy way Sophie fit into their routine. It all felt too good to be real, like something that would inevitably fall apart if he let himself believe in it. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe he needed to stop waiting for things to fall apart and just let himself be happy. The thought terrified him. Sophie came over 3 times that week. Once to plan the solar system project with Ava, sketching out designs and making lists of materials they'd need. Once to help Ryan fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom because she claimed to know about plumbing and turned out to actually be pretty good at it. And once just because Ava asked if she could come for dinner, and Sophie said yes before Ryan even had a chance to extend the invitation himself. Each visit felt more natural than the last. Sophie learned where they kept the glasses and the extra towels. She knew how Ava liked her sandwiches cut and that Ryan took his coffee black. Small details that added up to something that looked an awful lot like belonging. On Friday night, after Ava had gone to bed and Sophie was getting ready to leave, Ryan worked up the courage to ask the question that had been building in his chest all week. Do you want to stay for a while? We could watch a movie or something. Sophie looked surprised. You sure it's late? I'm sure, if you want to. She smiled. I'd like that. They settled on the couch with a movie neither of them really cared about playing in the background. The volume was low, their conversation more interesting than anything happening on screen. They talked about everything and nothing. Music they liked, places they'd traveled or wanted to travel, embarrassing moments from their teenage years. At some point, Sophie shifted closer, and Ryan became acutely aware of the small space between them. His heart was beating faster than it should have been, and he felt like a teenager again, nervous and hopeful and terrified all at once. Can I tell you something? Sophie said softly. Yeah, I've been alone for a long time. Since I left the center, I've just been going through the motions. Working, paying bills, existing. I forgot what it felt like to be part of something, to matter to people. Ryan turned to look at her. You matter. I know. I'm starting to remember that. She paused, then added quietly, because of you and Ava. Sophie, I'm not trying to make this weird, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know that these past few weeks have meant something to me, more than you probably realize. Ryan felt his chest tighten. They've meant something to me too. They looked at each other for a long moment, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. Ryan wanted to reach out, to close that small space, to see what would happen if he stopped overthinking everything and just acted. But before he could move, Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. Early shift tomorrow. Ryan stood too, confused by the sudden change, but not wanting to push. Okay, yeah, thanks for coming over. Thanks for having me. She left quickly, and Ryan stood in the doorway watching her go, feeling like he'd missed something important, like there had been a moment and he'd let it slip away. He went to bed frustrated with himself, replaying the conversation and wondering what he should have done differently. But underneath the frustration was something else. Hope, maybe. The sense that whatever was building between them wasn't finished yet. The next morning was Saturday, and Ryan had promised Ava they'd go to the craft store to buy supplies for the solar system project. They were in the middle of breakfast when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Hello? Ryan Carter? The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. Yeah, that's me. This is Margaret Chen from Harbor Point Community Center. Do you have a moment to talk? Ryan's stomach dropped. He hadn't thought about that place in years, except for what Sophie had told him. Sure. What's this about? I'm calling because we're doing an alumni outreach program. trying to reconnect with families whose children attended our after-school program. We'd love to get your feedback and hear about your experience. Ryan felt anger flash through him, hot and immediate. My experience? You want to know about my experience? There was a pause on the other end. Is everything all right, Mr. Carter? No, actually, it's not. Ryan stood up, moving into the living room so Ava wouldn't hear. I know what happened there. I know how you treated the kids. I know what you did to the staff who tried to stand up for them. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sophie Lane. Ring a bell? The volunteer you fired for protecting a kid who got hurt? Another pause, longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. Mr. Carter, I understand you may have heard some stories, but I can assure you that our center operates with the highest standards of care. Don't. Ryan's voice was hard. Don't give me that corporate bullshit. I know what happened. I know you chose money over kids. I know you pushed out the people who actually cared. Mr. Carter, if you have specific complaints, I'd be happy to discuss them through the proper channels. I don't want to discuss anything with you. I want you to know that what you did was wrong, that you hurt people, good people who were trying to help kids. He hung up before she could respond, his hand shaking with adrenaline. For a moment he just stood there, breathing hard, surprised by the force of his own anger. Ava appeared in the doorway. Dad, are you okay? Ryan forced himself to calm down, to put his anger away where she couldn't see it. I'm fine, kiddo. Just a frustrating phone call. About what? Nothing important. Come on, let's get ready to go to the store. But as they drove to the craft store, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the call. About the casual way that woman had reached out, like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't destroyed Sophie's career and covered up a kid getting hurt. He thought about Sophie, waiting tables at a diner instead of working with kids because one nonprofit had blacklisted her. He thought about all the children who could have benefited from her kindness and patience but never got the chance. The anger sat in his chest all morning, making it hard to focus on foam balls and paint colors. Ava noticed his distraction but didn't comment, probably used to him being preoccupied with things she didn't understand. When they got home, Ryan couldn't help himself. He texted Sophie. The community center called me today. Some kind of alumni outreach. The response came fast. What did you say? I told them I knew what happened, that what they did was wrong. Ryan, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. They shouldn't get to pretend everything was fine. His phone rang a moment later. Sophie. Hey, he answered. You really told them off? Her voice sounded strange, thick. Yeah, I was probably too harsh, but I don't care. They deserved it. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. No one's ever stood up for me like that before. Ryan felt his throat tighten. They should have. What they did to you was wrong. I know, but knowing it and hearing someone else say it are different things. Sophie, can I come over? I know it's last minute, but I need to see you. Of course, come over. She arrived 20 minutes later, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Ryan let her in without a word, and she walked straight into his living room and sat down on the couch, her hands shaking slightly. Ava was in her room working on homework, so Ryan sat down next to Sophie and waited for her to speak. I've spent 3 years thinking it was my fault, Sophie said finally. That if I'd just been smarter or more diplomatic, I could have made them listen. That I'd failed those kids by getting fired. It wasn't your fault. I know that intellectually, but emotionally? She shook her head. I've been carrying around this guilt like it's something I deserve. Like I should have been able to fix a broken system all by myself. Ryan reached out and took her hand without thinking. She squeezed back hard. You did everything right, he said firmly. You protected a kid who got hurt. You stood up to people who were abusing their power. The fact that they punished you for it says everything about them and nothing about you. Sophie looked at him, tears streaming down her face now. Why didn't I see that before? Because you were alone, and it's hard to see clearly when you're alone. I'm not alone anymore, am I? No, Ryan said. You're not. She leaned into him then, her head on his shoulder, and Ryan wrapped his arm around her without hesitation. They sat like that for a long time, Sophie crying quietly while Ryan held her, feeling the weight of 3 years of pain and guilt finally breaking loose. Eventually, her tears slowed. She pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize. You needed that. I guess I did. She laughed shakily. I probably look like a mess. You look fine. She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Something that had been building for weeks, maybe longer. Ryan felt his heart start to race. Ryan, Sophie said softly, can I ask you something? Anything. What are we doing? This thing between us, what is it? Ryan knew what she was really asking, and for once he didn't want to hide behind vague answers or careful deflection. I don't know exactly, he said honestly, but I know I care about you, more than I probably should after such a short time. I care about you too, and Ava. You've both given me something I didn't realize I was missing. What's that? A reason to believe things can get better. Ryan felt something settle in his chest, something that felt an awful lot like certainty. They can. They will. You sound so sure. I'm sure. Because I've seen what you do for Ava, how you light up when you're with her, how she lights up when she's with you. That's not nothing, Sophie. That's everything. Sophie's eyes filled with tears again, but these ones look different, happier. I was so scared to come back into your lives, she admitted. Scared I'd mess it up or that it wouldn't be what I remembered. But it's better. You're both better than I remembered. So are you. They looked at each other for a long moment, and then slowly, carefully, Ryan leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Sophie kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his face, it felt like an answer, like something clicking into place that had been waiting to align for a long time. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing a little harder. Ryan rested his forehead against hers, his heart pounding. Was that okay? He asked. Sophie laughed softly. More than okay. Good, because I've been wanting to do that for a while now. Me too. They sat there together, close and quiet, until Ava's voice called out from her bedroom asking if Sophie was staying for dinner. They pulled apart, both of them smiling, and Sophie called back that yes, she was staying. Over dinner that night, Ava chattered about her homework and the solar system project and 100 other things. But Ryan noticed the way she kept glancing between him and Sophie, her expression thoughtful. Kids were perceptive. She could probably sense that something had shifted. After dinner, while Sophie helped Ava with her reading assignment, Ryan cleaned up the kitchen and thought about what had just happened. He'd kissed Sophie. She'd kissed him back. And now everything was different. The scary part was that he didn't want to take it back. Despite all his fears about complicating things or making promises he couldn't keep, he wanted this. Wanted her. When Sophie came into the kitchen, Ava occupied with a book in the living room, Ryan turned to her. We should talk, he said, about what this means. For Ava. Sophie nodded. I agree. I don't want to confuse her or make her think I'm replacing anyone. You're not replacing anyone. Her mom's been gone for 5 years. You're not filling a vacancy, Sophie. You're just... He paused, looking for the right words. You're just here, and that matters. I want to be here, for both of you. But I need to know what you want this to be. Ryan took a breath. I want to try. I want to see where this goes. But we need to go slow, for Ava's sake. I understand. Slow is good. And if at any point it's not working, we talk about it. No ghosting, no disappearing. We're adults. We communicate. Sophie smiled. Deal. Okay then. Ryan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. We're doing this. We're doing this. Ava appeared in the doorway. Doing what? Ryan and Sophie exchanged a glance. Miss Sophie is going to be coming around more often, Ryan said carefully. Is that okay with you? Ava's face broke into a huge grin. Yes, that's way more than okay. Good. Because we like having her here. I like being here, Sophie added. Ava looked between them, her smile knowing in that way kids had when they understood more than adults gave them credit for. Are you guys friends now? Like special friends? Ryan felt his face heat up. We're friends, yeah. Good. Ava nodded decisively. You need more friends, Dad. You're too serious all the time. Sophie laughed, and Ryan couldn't help but join her. Leave it to his 7-year-old to cut through all the complexity and get straight to the heart of things. That night, after Sophie left and Ava was in bed, Ryan sat on the couch with his phone, looking at a text Sophie had sent. "Thank you for today, for all of it. I feel lighter than I have in years." He typed back, "Me too. Get some sleep. See you tomorrow?" "Definitely." Ryan set his phone aside and looked around his apartment. The same mismatched furniture, the same cluttered surfaces, the same life he'd been living for years. But it all felt different now. Brighter somehow, fuller. He'd spent so long protecting himself and Ava from getting hurt that he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in, to take a risk on something that might not work out, but also might be exactly what they needed. Sophie wasn't perfect. Neither was he. They both had baggage and scars and reasons to be cautious, but maybe that was okay. Maybe perfect wasn't the point. Maybe the point was just showing up, being present, choosing each other even when it was scary. Ryan got up and checked on Ava one more time before going to bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, rabbit tucked under one arm, completely at peace. He stood in her doorway and thought about all the ways his life had changed in just a few weeks. How one random encounter in a cafe had led to this, to Sophie being part of their lives, to the possibility of something more. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were all going to be okay. Better than okay, even. They were going to be happy. The solar system project took over Ryan's kitchen table for the next 2 weeks. Foam balls in various sizes covered every surface. Paint splattered on newspapers spread across the floor, and Ava's meticulous notes about planetary distances and colors were taped to the refrigerator. Sophie came over almost every evening after her shift at the diner, still wearing her work uniform, and dove straight into helping Ava paint Jupiter's stripes or figure out how to make Saturn's rings stay attached. Ryan watched them work together, heads bent over the project, and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, or relief at having help. It was deeper than that. It was the recognition that this, Sophie covered in paint, Ava laughing as she tried to explain why Uranus was tilted on its axis, all of them crammed around his small kitchen table. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without complications, but whole. On the night before the project was due, they stayed up until almost midnight putting the finishing touches on it. Ava had fallen asleep on the couch around 10, exhausted but satisfied, her rabbit clutched to her chest. Ryan and Sophie worked quietly, hanging the planets from a wire frame they'd rigged up, making sure everything was secure. "This is way better than anything I ever made for a school project," Ryan said, stepping back to admire their work. Sophie smiled, wiping paint off her hands with a rag. "Ava did most of it. We just helped." "Don't sell yourself short. You've been here every night for 2 weeks." "I wanted to be here." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt his chest tighten with something he wasn't quite ready to name. "Why?" Sophie set down the rag and met his eyes. "Because this is the first time in 3 years I've felt like I'm doing something that matters. Because when I'm here with you and Ava, I remember who I used to be, who I want to be again." "And who's that?" "Someone who makes a difference, even if it's just for 2 people. Ryan crossed the small space between them and kissed her, soft and slow. When they pulled apart, Sophie was smiling. "You make a difference to us," he said quietly. "More than you know." They stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by planets and paint and the evidence of their collaboration, and Ryan realized he'd been wrong about something fundamental. He'd spent years thinking he had to do everything alone, that asking for help was weakness, that letting people in was dangerous. But standing here with Sophie, with his daughter asleep in the next room and a solar system hanging above their heads, he understood that the opposite was true. Strength wasn't about doing it all yourself. It was about knowing when to let someone else carry part of the weight. The next morning, Ava woke up early and insisted on checking the project 17 times to make sure nothing had fallen off overnight. Sophie had stayed over, sleeping on the couch, and she helped Ryan make breakfast while Ava fussed over her planets. "You didn't have to stay," Ryan said, cracking eggs into a pan. "I know, but I wanted to see her face when she saw the finished project in daylight." And when Ava came into the kitchen, her whole face glowing with pride and excitement, Ryan understood why. Some moments were worth being present for, worth rearranging your life to witness. He drove Ava to school with the solar system carefully secured in the back of his truck, Sophie following in her car because she'd offered to help carry it inside. They walked into the school together, the three of them, and Ryan saw the way other parents looked at them, like they were a unit, a family. It should have scared him. A month ago, it would have. But now it just felt right. After they delivered the project to Ava's classroom and said goodbye, Ryan walked Sophie to her car in the parking lot. She had to get to her shift at the diner, and he had to get to the warehouse, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave. "Thank you," Ryan said, "for all of this, for showing up." Sophie leaned against her car door. "Stop thanking me. I'm not doing you a favor, Ryan. I'm here because I want to be." "I know, but still, thank you." She kissed him quickly, then pulled back with a smile. "See you tonight?" "Yeah, tonight." Ryan watched her drive away, then sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss asking where he was, and reality crashed back in. He had a shift to get to, bills to pay, a life that existed outside of this bubble he'd been living in for the past few weeks. But something had changed. The warehouse felt less suffocating now. The work felt more manageable, because he knew that at the end of the day, he had something to come home to. Someone to come home to. That afternoon, while Ryan was stacking boxes and trying not to think about how much his back hurt, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. "Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Principal Morrison from Ava's school." Ryan's stomach dropped. "Is everything okay? Is Ava hurt?" No, nothing like that. I'm calling because Ava's science project has caused quite a stir. Her teacher submitted it for the district-wide science fair, and it's been selected as a finalist." Ryan stood there in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by boxes and noise, trying to process what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The district science fair. It's a competition for elementary students. Ava's solar system model is one of 5 finalists from our school. The fair is this Saturday. I wanted to let you know in case you'd like to attend." "Of course I'll attend, absolutely." "Wonderful, I'll email you the details." "And Mr. Carter? That project was truly exceptional. You should be very proud." After he hung up, Ryan just stood there grinning like an idiot until one of his coworkers asked if he'd won the lottery. He immediately texted Sophie. "Ava's project is a finalist in the district science fair. Saturday. Can you come?" The response came within seconds. "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it." When Ryan picked Ava up from school that afternoon, she was practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad, did you hear? Did they call you?" "I heard. Science fair finalist. That's huge, kiddo. Do you think we can win?" "I think you already won by making something you're proud of. But yeah, I think you've got a good shot." Ava threw her arms around him right there in the school pickup line, not caring that other kids were watching. "Thank you for helping me." "Thank Miss Sophie. She did most of the work." "Can she come to the fair?" "Already invited her. She said yes." Ava's smile could have lit up the whole city. That night, Sophie came over for dinner and they celebrated with pizza and ice cream. Ava talked nonstop about the science fair, about what she was going to wear, about what she'd say if the judges asked her questions. Ryan and Sophie listened, encouraging her, helping her practice her explanations of planetary orbits and the difference between terrestrial and gas giants. After Ava went to bed, Ryan and Sophie sat on the couch together, her head on his shoulder, both of them tired but content. "This is the happiest I've seen her," Sophie said quietly, "ever since I've known her. She's got a lot to be happy about." "So do you." Ryan turned to look at her. "Yeah, I do." They'd been dancing around something for weeks now, careful not to put too much weight on it, afraid of jinxing whatever this was. But sitting here in the quiet of his apartment, Ava safe in her room and Sophie warm against his side, Ryan decided it was time to stop dancing. "I need to tell you something," he said. Sophie sat up slightly, her expression cautious. "Okay? I'm falling for you. Maybe I already have. And that terrifies me because I've spent so long protecting Ava and myself from getting hurt that I forgot how to just let things happen." Sophie's eyes were bright. "Ryan." "Wait, let me finish." He took her hand. "But I don't want to be scared anymore. I don't want to keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're good for us. For both of us. And I want you in our lives, not just as someone who helps out or comes around sometimes. I want you here. Really here." Sophie's voice was thick when she spoke. I want that too. So much. But I need to know you're sure. Because Ava's already attached to you. If you're not ready for this, if you think you might change your mind, I'm not going anywhere, Sophie interrupted. I know it's fast, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I'm sure about this. About you and Ava. I've never been more sure of anything. Ryan kissed her then, deep and certain, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling through tears. So we're doing this, he said. For real. For real. They stayed up late talking about what that meant, what they wanted their future to look like. Sophie admitted she'd been looking for a new apartment closer to them, somewhere she could actually afford on her diner salary. Ryan told her she didn't have to rush, that they could take things one step at a time. But inside, he was already imagining what it would be like to wake up with her there every morning, to not have to say goodbye at the end of every night. The week leading up to the science fair felt impossibly long. Ava was a bundle of nervous energy, practicing her presentation in front of the bathroom mirror, double-checking that her project was still intact, worrying about every possible thing that could go wrong. Ryan tried to calm her down, but he was almost as anxious as she was. Sophie came over every night that week, steady and calm, in a way that balanced out their anxiety. She helped Ava rehearse, reminded Ryan to breathe, and generally kept them both from spiraling. By Friday night, even Ava seemed more relaxed. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you, Ryan told her as he tucked her into bed. I know, Dad, you've said that like 100 times. Well, I'm going to say it again. I'm proud of you. Not because of the science fair, but because you worked hard on something you cared about. That's what matters. Ava smiled sleepily. Is Miss Sophie proud of me too? She's very proud of you. Good. Because I want her to be. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. They arrived at the school gymnasium where the science fair was being held to find it packed with families. Projects set up on tables around the perimeter. Judges walking around with clipboards. Ava's project was displayed near the center, the planets hanging beautifully from their frame, each one painted with meticulous care. Sophie arrived a few minutes after them, wearing a dress Ryan had never seen before, her hair down instead of in its usual ponytail. She looked nervous, which was oddly comforting, like she cared as much about this as they did. You look nice, Ryan said. I wanted to look presentable. This is important. Ava grabbed Sophie's hand. Come see where they put my project. Ryan followed them through the crowd, watching Ava show Sophie the display, pointing out details and explaining her process. Other parents were doing the same with their kids, the gymnasium full of voices and excitement, and the particular energy of children who'd worked hard on something and wanted the world to see. The judges came by around 10 o'clock. 3 adults with kind faces and serious clipboards asking Ava questions about her methodology, her research, her understanding of the solar system. Ava answered confidently, her nervousness from earlier completely gone now that she was in her element. Ryan listened with pride as his 7-year-old explained gravitational pull and orbital periods like she'd been studying astronomy her entire life. When the judges moved on, Ava turned to them with wide eyes. How did I do? You were perfect, Sophie said. More than perfect, Ryan added. You were brilliant. They walked around looking at other projects while they waited for the results to be announced. There were volcanoes and ecosystems, experiments with plants and batteries, elaborate displays about everything from dinosaurs to weather patterns. The competition was steep. Ryan tried not to get his hopes up. But when the announcements finally came and Ava's name was called for second place in her grade level, the joy on her face made everything worth it. She ran up to collect her ribbon, beaming so hard Ryan thought her face might split in half. Sophie grabbed his hand and squeezed, and when he looked at her, she had tears running down her face. Why are you crying? He asked, pulling her close. Because she's so happy. Because you're so happy. Because this is... Her voice broke. Because this is everything I didn't know I was missing. Ryan kissed the top of her head, not caring who saw. Me too. After the ceremony, they took Ava out for lunch at her favorite burger place. She talked nonstop about the fair, about the judges' questions, about the other projects she'd seen. She clutched her second-place ribbon like it was made of gold, refusing to let it out of her sight even to eat. I can't wait to tell Maya on Monday, she said through a mouthful of fries. She's going to be so excited. I'm excited, Sophie said. Second place is amazing, Ava. I wish we'd gotten first place. Second place means you were one of the best projects there, Ryan pointed out. Out of probably 100 kids, that's incredible. Ava considered this, then nodded. Yeah, you're right. Second place is pretty good. After lunch, they went to the park, the same one where Sophie and Ava had reunited weeks ago. Ava ran off to play on the swings, her ribbon pinned to her jacket like a badge of honor. Ryan and Sophie sat on a bench watching her, shoulders touching, comfortable in their silence. Can I ask you something? Sophie said after a while. Always. That day at the cafe, when we first ran into each other, do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't sat at your table? If I'd chosen somewhere else to sit? Ryan thought about it. All the time, actually. Me too. It feels like fate or something, like we were supposed to find each other. I don't know about fate, Ryan said slowly, but I know I'm grateful it happened. However it happened. Sophie looked at him, her expression serious. I need to tell you something. Ryan felt a flutter of anxiety. Okay. I've been thinking about what's next for me, career-wise, I mean. And I've decided I want to try again, to work with kids. That's great, Sophie. That's what you're meant to do. I know, but I'm scared. Scared I'll get rejected again. Scared it won't work out. Scared I'll fail. Ryan took her hand. You won't fail, and even if it doesn't work out the first time, you try again. That's how this works. Is it? It is. Look at me. I failed at 100 things, but I kept showing up. For Ava, for myself, and now for you. That's all any of us can do. Sophie's eyes filled with tears again. How are you so sure? Because I see what you do for Ava. How you light up when you're helping her, teaching her, just being with her. That's not something you can fake. It's who you are. Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder. What if I apply and they all say no again? Then we figure out plan B, together. You're not alone in this anymore, Sophie. Whatever comes next, we're facing it as a team. Ava came running over then, breathless and happy. Dad, Miss Sophie, come push me on the swings. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the park, taking turns pushing Ava higher and higher until she was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Other families came and went, and Ryan watched them all, parents with their kids, couples walking hand in hand, elderly people feeding the ducks, and realized something he'd never quite articulated before. Life wasn't about having everything figured out. It wasn't about being perfect, or never making mistakes, or always knowing the right thing to do. It was about showing up, about choosing to be present even when it was hard, about letting people in even when it scared you. He'd spent so long thinking he had to protect Ava from anything that might hurt her that he'd almost protected her from joy too, from connection, from the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of letting people matter to you. Sophie had reminded him of that, not just through her relationship with Ava, but through her willingness to be vulnerable herself, to admit she was scared and hurt and trying to find her way, just like everyone else. That night, after they'd put Ava to bed and were sitting on the couch together, Ryan made a decision. Move in with us, he said. Sophie went very still. What? Move in. Your lease is up next month anyway, right? And you're here almost every night. It makes sense. Ryan, that's huge. I know, but I'm ready. If you are. Sophie pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? What about Ava? What about her? She adores you. She'd probably do a backflip if I told her you were moving in. But it's fast. We've only been, whatever we are, for a few weeks. I know. And if you're not ready, I understand. But I also know that I wake up every morning wishing you were already here. And I go to bed every night wishing you didn't have to leave. So why keep pretending this is temporary when we both know it's not? Sophie's eyes were bright with tears. You really want this? I really want this. I want you here. I want Ava to have you in her life every day. Not just when your schedule allows. I want us to be a family, a real family. Sophie kissed him then, hard and desperate and full of all the things they hadn't said yet. When she pulled back, she was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll move in. Yes to all of it. Ryan felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless and uncertain for years finally finding its place. They told Ava the next morning over breakfast. Ryan had been nervous about how to approach it, but Sophie suggested they just be direct. Kids could handle honesty better than adults thought. Ava, we need to talk to you about something, Ryan started. Ava looked up from her cereal, immediately suspicious. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. Actually, it's good news. Miss Sophie is going to move in with us. Ava blinked. Like live here? All the time? Yeah, her apartment lease is ending, and we thought... Ava screamed. An actual scream of pure joy that made both Ryan and Sophie jump. Then she launched herself at Sophie, hugging her so hard they almost fell off the chair. This is the best news ever. You're going to live here. We're going to be together all the time. Sophie hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. Is that okay with you? Are you kidding? It's perfect. Ryan watched them, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt his own eyes fill. He'd been so scared for so long. Scared of being hurt. Scared of Ava being hurt. Scared of letting anyone close enough to matter. But this messy, imperfect, beautiful moment was worth every ounce of fear he'd carried. The next few weeks were chaotic. Sophie gave notice at her old apartment and started moving her things in one carload at a time. They had to rearrange furniture to make space, had multiple discussions about closet organization and bathroom schedules, had moments of friction as they learned to navigate sharing space full-time. It wasn't smooth. Sophie had habits that drove Ryan crazy, like leaving cabinet doors open and forgetting to put the milk back in the fridge. Ryan had his own issues, like his tendency to work too much and his inability to ever fully relax. They had their first real fight 3 days after she moved in, about something stupid that Ryan couldn't even remember later. But they worked through it. They talked. They compromised. They figured it out together. And slowly, the apartment started to feel like it belonged to all three of them, instead of just Ryan and Ava with Sophie as a visitor. Ava thrived having Sophie there full-time. Her grades improved, not because she was struggling before, but because she had someone who could help her with homework every night. She started coming out of her shell more, inviting friends over because she wasn't embarrassed about their small apartment anymore. She seemed lighter, happier, more settled. And Ryan felt the same way. Coming home wasn't just about collapsing after a long day anymore. It was about Sophie being there, about dinner conversations and shared responsibilities, and the simple comfort of not being alone. 2 months after Sophie moved in, she came home with news. She'd applied to 3 different after-school programs and youth organizations, and one had called her for an interview. It's not the same as the community center, she said nervously. It's a smaller program, just 20 kids, but they focus on underprivileged families, kids who need extra support. That's perfect for you, Ryan said. You think so? I know so. The interview went well, too well, almost. Sophie came home convinced she'd somehow messed it up, despite answering every question confidently. She spent 3 days anxiously checking her email until finally the call came. They wanted to hire her. Sophie cried when she told Ryan and Ava. Not sad tears, but tears of relief and validation, and the pure joy of finally getting to do what she was meant to do. Ryan held her while she sobbed, and Ava joined the hug, and they stood in the kitchen together like that until Sophie's tears turned to laughter. You did it, Ryan said. You got back up. We did it, Sophie corrected. I couldn't have done this without you both. Sophie started her new job in September right as Ava was beginning 3rd grade. She worked 3 afternoons a week to start, with the possibility of more hours later. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough combined with Ryan's warehouse salary. More importantly, Sophie came home energized instead of drained, full of stories about the kids she was working with and the programs they were building. Ryan watched her transform over those first few months. The guilt and heaviness that had weighed on her when they first met gradually lifted, replaced by a confidence he hadn't seen before. She was doing what she loved again, and it showed in everything she did. Meanwhile, Ryan had his own transformation happening. With Sophie's encouragement, he'd started looking for better jobs, something that paid more, or had better hours. He'd gotten used to the warehouse, to the routine, and the low expectations, but Sophie pushed him to want more for himself. You're smart, she told him one night. You're capable. You don't have to settle for a job that treats you like you're disposable. I've been there 7 years. It's stable. Stable isn't the same as good enough. So Ryan updated his resume, something he hadn't touched since before Ava was born. He applied to logistics companies, to management positions at other warehouses, to anything that seemed like a step up. He got rejected for most of them, but a few called him for interviews. 3 months after Sophie moved in, he got an offer. Assistant manager at a distribution center across town. Better pay, better benefits, actual opportunities for advancement. He accepted it immediately. When he told Sophie and Ava that night, they celebrated with ice cream and a movie, all three of them piled on the couch together. Ava fell asleep halfway through, her head on Sophie's lap, her rabbit tucked under one arm. Ryan looked at them, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone just trying to survive, but real hope. The kind that comes from knowing you're not alone, that you have people in your corner, that the future might actually be better than the past. By the time winter came around, they'd settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Ryan worked his new job, Sophie worked at the youth program, and Ava continued being her brilliant, kind, slightly chaotic self. They had family dinners most nights, helped each other with household chores, navigated the small conflicts that came with any relationship, and built something that felt real and lasting. One Saturday in December, Ryan came home from running errands to find Sophie and Ava in the kitchen baking cookies. They were covered in flour, the kitchen was a disaster, and they were laughing so hard they could barely function. "What's going on in here, Dick?" he asked. "We're making cookies for Ava's class party," Sophie explained. "Or we're trying to. Turns out we're both terrible at this." "They don't look terrible," Ryan said, examining the misshapen lumps on the baking sheet. "Dad, they look like blobs. Delicious blobs." He joined them in the kitchen, and somehow the three of them managed to produce several batches of cookies that were actually edible. They ate dinner together that night, spaghetti that Ryan made while Sophie and Ava cleaned up the baking mess, and afterward they played cards at the kitchen table until Ava started yawning. Ryan tucked her into bed while Sophie did the dishes. When he came back to the kitchen, she was standing at the sink with her back to him, and for a moment he just watched her. The woman who'd been a stranger 6 months ago and was now the center of his world. "Hey," he said softly. She turned, smiling. "Hey yourself. I need to tell you something." "Okay?" "I love you." Sophie's smile widened. "I know." "You know?" "Of course I know. You've been in love with me for months. You're not subtle, Ryan." He laughed. "Fair enough. But I wanted to say it out loud. I love you, Sophie. And I want you to know that this life we're building, it's everything I didn't know I needed." Sophie crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him. "I love you too, both of you. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "A place to belong." They stood there holding each other in the quiet kitchen, and Ryan thought about the path that had led them here. All the wrong turns and hard choices, the pain and the struggle, the moments when giving up seemed easier than going on. But he hadn't given up. Neither had Sophie. And because they'd both kept going, kept trying, kept believing that things could get better, they'd found each other. That was the thing about life, Ryan realized. It didn't hand you perfect moments. It didn't promise that everything would work out, or that you'd never get hurt, or that all your sacrifices would be worth it. But it gave you chances, opportunities to choose connection over isolation, to choose hope over fear, to choose showing up over giving up. And sometimes, if you were lucky and brave enough to take those chances, you ended up with something more beautiful than you ever could have imagined. Ryan kissed Sophie slowly, taking his time, savoring the moment and the certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Ryan stood in Ava's doorway watching her sleep. She was getting so big, growing so fast. Soon she'd be a teenager, then an adult with her own life and dreams. The thought should have scared him, but it didn't, because he wasn't raising her alone anymore. He had Sophie now, a true partner in all of this. And together, they were giving Ava something neither of them had fully experienced themselves, a stable, loving home where she was seen and valued and supported. Ryan walked back to his own room, where Sophie was already asleep, curled up on her side with one hand under her pillow. He slid into bed next to her, and she shifted closer without waking, her head finding its place on his shoulder. He lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and let himself feel the full weight of what they'd built together. Not just a relationship, but a family. Not just a place to live, but a home. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. They'd have hard days and disagreements and moments when everything felt like too much. But they'd also have this, quiet nights and shared laughter, and the knowledge that they weren't facing any of it alone. And that, Ryan thought as he drifted off to sleep, was more than enough. It was everything.